if you enjoy it, as my channel is very tiny and I'm doing my best to grow it. So your support is very much appreciated, whether it's through just a view, whether it's through a like, whether it's through a subscribe, or all three. Your support is appreciated, so thank you. I'm going to be doing today a true crime whispered ASMR video, as you might have guessed from the title. This is something I have not done previously on my channel, and I'm just trying to diversify a little bit and do something other than lotion sounds and unintelligible whispers. So please do let me know down below what you think, whether you like it, whether you don't like it, some feedback on how it could be better, or if you have some video ideas that you would like to see me start doing. I would love those suggestions too. So thank you in advance. I do have to give a trigger warning for this video. Obviously, it does discuss murder as well as sexual assault and violence. So if you are below the age of 13, 14, please click on another one of my videos. Another thing I wanted to preface was that there's a lot of information online about this case, and in doing my research I noticed that there's a lot of misinformation about this case. Now, I've done my best to make sure all my information is accurate from reviewing court documents and court transcripts and information from reputable sources. But if there's a detail I got wrong, please correct me in the comments and let me know. But as I mentioned, I did try and obviously make sure this was all factual, and I provided my sources in the description. The last thing I want to say before I get into this case is that this is from the point of view, or rather it's focused on Amanda and her experience and how this has affected her. There are obviously other players. This is obviously about Meredith, the victim, but you'll understand as I go on why I say this is more Amanda's story, for lack of a better word. Okay, so I'm gonna start out and give you a little bit of information about our victim, Meredith. All my notes are to the left. There are 15 pages of notes. I apologize if I'm looking to the left a lot, but there's just a lot of information here, and I want to make sure that I get it right. So, Meredith Susanna Kercher was murdered in Italy on November 1st, 2007 in the town of Perugia. She was just 21 years old at the time of her death. She was born December 28th, 1985, to parents Arlene and John Kercher. She was the youngest of 4 children, older brother John and Lyle, as well as her sister Stephanie. Now, they grew up in Coulson, North London. Southern London. Growing up, she showed an interest in poetry, gymnastics, and ballet, and she was known to her friends as Mez. She was described by friends and family as being sociable, loving, and known to always have a smile, to be caring, intelligent, witty, and popular, as having a sense of ridiculousness as a child, as someone with a big heart who was open and generous. She was close to her family, spoke to them often, and seemingly had a fulfilled, happy life. She spent her early college years at the University of Leeds, where she studied European politics and Italian. She had plans to go to the University of Perugia in Italy, and to fund her experience, she worked at a local airport. So she was clearly driven. Sounds like she's a very outgoing person and well-liked. So in 2007, she moved to Italy to study modern history, political theory, and history of cinema. She said at the time that she had chosen the University of Perugia as she believed it to be safer than the more populated cities like Milan or Rome. Prior to leaving, her dad said she was very excited and looked at the opportunity as a dream. So she was very much looking forward to her experience in Italy. Now we're going to jump forward and we're going to talk about Amanda Knox. So Amanda was born July 9th, 1987 to parents Etta and Kurt Knox. She was the oldest of 4 children. Her parents divorced when she was 10 years old, so the youngest 2 are from her dad's new marriage. But she had 3 sisters, Deanna, Delaney, and Ashley. They grew up in Seattle, Washington, and growing up she had an interest in reading, language, and travel. As a teenager, she played soccer, and her athletic skill garnered her the nickname Foxy Knoxy. This nickname would later be used to villainize her and really portray her or support the claim that she was this very promiscuous person. But we will get to that as things carry on. She was described by her friends and family as being very outgoing, slightly naive, strong-willed, and mischievous, so she liked to cause a little trouble and push buttons. She enjoyed playing music, language, and reading. At the age of 15, she visited Italy with her family. They went to Rome, Pisa, and the Amalfi Coast, as well as the ruins of Pompeii. She is said to really have enjoyed her trip there, and this sparked an interest in Italy. Her mother later gave her the book Under the Tuscan Sun, which evidently really pushed her further into this interest in Italian culture. So in 2005, Amanda graduated from Seattle Preparatory High School, and then she entered the University of Washington in the fall of that year. She planned to pursue a degree in linguistics. Amanda decided that she would like to go to school abroad in Italy. Of course, as I mentioned, at the University of Perugia. She wanted to go there for a year, and she worked several part-time jobs to fulfill this dream, as Meredith did. Similar to Meredith as well, she had chosen Perugia as she thought it was safer and less populated than the more common destinations in Italy. So in 2007, she moved to Perugia. Amanda and Meredith met when they became roommates through the university. They ended up finding a villa, and they moved in with 2 other females in their 20s, who were Philomena and Laura. Meredith moved in September 10th, and Amanda moved in September 20th. They quickly became friends and bonded over their shared studies and interests. chiamo buono Sorita. I'm sure I butchered that, but the translation in English means we will see each other. Good evening. And this is something to note for later on in the case. Raphael then went to his apartment to spend the night around 5 p.m. She says they watched a French film, had sex, and smoked weed. Now, according to Italian investigators, Meredith returned home from a friend's house, or it's believed she returned home from a friend's house around 9 p.m. that evening, and she thought she was alone in the villa. Now, according to Amanda returned home the morning of November 2nd, and when she returned, she noticed that the front door was open. She said that this was not unusual living with 3 other people, because the door would not close properly unless it was locked. So initially she didn't necessarily think of this as being super abnormal. So when she goes inside, she calls out to her roommates and nobody answers. She does a quick scan of the villa and notices that Laura's door is open and she wasn't in there. Meredith and Filomeno's doors were closed, so she assumed they were sleeping. Amanda then took a shower, and as she was getting out of the shower, she noticed blood on the bath mat, drips of blood on the floor in the sink, and blood on the sink faucet. She says she touched the blood in the sink and noticed that it had hardened, so it wasn't fresh. She thought at the time that one of her roommates had some issues with her menstrual cycle and for some reason made a mess. She thought it was odd because her roommates wouldn't normally be that messy, but she just thought it was a one-off and that something had happened. So she got dressed and went into the other bathroom in the apartment to blow dry her hair. And when she went into the bathroom, she noticed that somebody had defecated in the toilet and left it. And at this point, she's starting to become concerned because she knows that her roommates wouldn't do that. So again, she starts to get concerned. But she leaves the apartment and goes back to Raphael's house at this point in time. Now she told him when she got there what she had found at the apartment, and he suggested at that point in time that she call her roommates. So she called Filomena first, who was with her boyfriend from the night before still. And Filomena let her know that their other roommate, Laura, was out of town for work. Amanda then called Meredith. I guess Meredith had 2 phones, one English phone and one Italian phone, or I guess one phone for London and one phone for Italy, I guess. So Amanda attempted to call both phones and there was no answer. So Amanda and Raphael at that point in time returned to the villa and went inside. They again scanned the apartment for any signs of a disturbance or anything, but everything looked rather normal. They opened Filomena's door and saw that her window was broken and open and that her room was a mess, but that nothing appeared to be taken because her laptop was still on her desk. They checked Laura's room, but nothing was disturbed, so they then went to Meredith's room, but the door was locked. They knocked and there was no answer. They then shouted her name, called out to her several times, but again, no answer. So their concern is starting to grow at this point, obviously. They went outside to see through a patio if they could see inside her window, but said that the angle was bad and that they couldn't see anything. They then went to the downstairs neighbors, the guys, and knocked on their door, but nobody answered. So at that inmates are asking the police to kick down Meredith's door or burst it down, whatever you want to call it, and they refuse at this point in time, saying that legally they don't have the right. So one of Philomena's friends kicks in the door at that point in time because they obviously need to know what's going on with Meredith, and this is unusual behavior for her. When they open the door, they find the room covered in blood. The window was open and broken, and Meredith was on the floor, partially covered with blankets. Her throat had been cut, and it would later be determined that she was sexually assaulted. At the time of her death, she had only been in Italy for 3 months, unfortunately, which is really sad. So, initially, Amanda and Raphael were interviewed as witnesses. They were not suspects. They willingly went to the police station every day. They weren't required to, but they were very cooperative in the investigation. Now, both of them maintained they had been together the evening of the first and knew nothing of the murders. They noticed quickly that the interviews turned to interrogations. On November 6th, after a 53-hour interrogation, Amanda and Raphael both made written confessions, is what they call them in Italy, but it's just their initial statement. In Amanda's confession, she says the following: I met Patrick at the basketball court of Piazza Gramana and we went home. I do not remember if Meredith was already there or if she came later. I find it difficult to remember those moments, but Patrick had sex with Meredith, with whom he was infatuated. But I do not remember well if Meredith had been threatened before. I vaguely remember that he killed her. So again, keep in mind that this was after a 53-hour interrogation where she was, according to her, denied food and water, obviously sleep deprived, and she says that she was physically hit in the back of the head multiple times during this interrogation. So the following day, Amanda makes a written statement retracting many of the things that she said in this confession. So this new statement in part reads, in regards to this confession that I made last night, I want to make clear that I'm very doubtful of the validity of my statements because they were made under the pressures of stress, shock, and extreme exhaustion. Not only was I told I would be arrested and put in jail for 30 years, but I was also hit in the head when I didn't remember a fact correctly. I understand that the police are under a lot of stress, so I understand the treatment I received. However, it was under this pressure and after many hours of confusion that my mind came up with these answers. In my mind, I saw Patrick in flashes of blurred images. Now remember, Patrick Lumbuma is her boss at Le Chic. So I saw Patrick in flashes of blurred images. I saw him near the basketball court. I saw him at my front door. I saw myself cowering in the kitchen with my hands over my ears because in my head I could hear Meredith screaming. But I've said this many times so as to make myself clear. These things seem unreal to me, like a dream, and I am convinced that they unsure. The wording on that is weird. But I am unsure if they are real things that happened or are just dreams my mind has made up to try and answer the questions in my head and the questions I am being asked. But the truth is, I'm unsure about the truth, and here's why. She goes on to go through several points explaining why she said the statement that she did, mostly indicating she was confused, and explaining that she said many of the things she did because the police lied and told her she was a liar. They told her they had evidence to prove that she was present during the murder. She also goes to note that Retrial has implicated her in his statements and that what he's saying was not true. As I said earlier, this is Amanda's side of the story. Retrial is also being charged with the same things Amanda is, and his story is similar. So he also gave a similar statement, a confession, and then retracted most of it as well. But again, this is her story, but they kind of overlap. So I will be discussing bits and pieces of Retrial as well in his court cases. So it should be noted that the confession was deemed illegally conducted later on in the investigation, as Amanda was entitled to an attorney, which she asked for, and was told that it would only make things worse for her. Retrial's statements regarding Amanda's involvement. So again, he had gone through a 53-hour interrogation, made similar confessions that Amanda did, and as a result of both of their confessions and statements, Amanda, Retrial, and Patrick are all arrested on November 6th. They are charged with murder as well as theft of Meredith phones and credit cards, because I guess some things were missing. Now, Patrick was quickly released as he had an alibi. I guess he was at his work and he had several people to confirm this alibi. All charges were dropped against him very quickly. Now, Amanda finally got to meet with her legal team on November 11th. On November 15th, they recover an 8-inch knife at Retrial's. Upon testing this knife, they claim to have found traces of Amanda's DNA on the handle and Meredith's DNA on the blade. Retrial said he couldn't understand why that would be, but came to the conclusion that they were all cooking together, and that Amanda had hurt her finger, or Meredith rather had hurt her finger. There's conflicting information on that, but that the blood was there from that they had just been cooking together, 3 of them, and that one of them had pricked their finger. Now, during their investigation, they also find DNA of Rudy Guede, and if you remember, he was a friend of the downstairs neighbors. At the crime scene, they find a bloody handprint of his, as well as his DNA inside Meredith's body, and throughout the crime scene, there was multiple pieces of DNA at the crime scene of Rudy's. Now, something to note here is that Rudy had a history of breaking and entering. At one point, he broke into a lawyer's office through a second-story window. Another time, he was caught brandishing a pocket knife when he broke into a home, and he was confronted by the homeowners at that time. And as recently as October 27th, so less than a week before the murder, he was arrested in Milan after breaking into a nursery school. He was found by police with a 28-centimeter knife that he had taken from the school kitchen. Now, shortly after the murders, Rudy fled to Germany, but after finding his DNA at the crime scene, he was arrested in Germany on November 20th and extradited back to Italy. Now, in Italy, they have an option of something called a fast-track trial, initial statement to police, he indicated that Amanda had not been home at the time of the murder. In October 2008, Rudy was found guilty for the sexual assault and murder of Meredith Kercher. He was sentenced at that time to 30 years in prison. Later on in the investigation, on January 10th, 2008, they identify Raphael's DNA on a chunk of Meredith's bra clasp that they had found on the floor. Now keep in mind that this was found on January 10th, 2008, and the murders took place November of 2007, November 1st, so this was quite a while after the murder happened. So again, keep that in mind. So the first trial for Amanda and Raphael begins in 2009. During this trial, there were over 50 hearings and dozens of witnesses, so there's a lot of information. I've done my best to summarize the important parts for you. So, the prosecution's theory in this case was always that this was sexually motivated, that this was some kind of dangerous sex game that had gone wrong, and that the three of them participated in this. They support this theory largely by trying to prove that Amanda is very promiscuous. They use photos of her, out at parties, drinking and things like that. They use the Foxy Noxy nickname and witnesses to support that she was a little bit promiscuous, but they rely heavily on that, and the Italian media jumped on that, and there was a lot of very disparaging and defamatory information about her at the time, but the main focus was that she was this very promiscuous girl. They point to Amanda and Raphael's conflicting statements as key points in their case. Now, the DNA evidence is, of course, the knife that they found at Raphael's house, which they claim contains Meredith and Amanda's DNA. They said that the knife had been cleaned with bleach, but that the DNA was still there, which is a little bit strange. Other DNA evidence that they claim to have is that the bloodstains found in the bathroom were said to have contained a mixture of Amanda and Meredith's DNA. They claimed that one of the bloody shoe prints in Meredith's bedroom was not the right size to be Rudy's, and they claimed that this must have been from Raphael. And another important DNA sample that they used in the prosecution was the bra clasp that they claimed to have Raphael's DNA on. Now, the defense's case largely tried to pick apart, of course, the DNA evidence, and in my opinion, were quite successful. So they had experts testify that the DNA on the knife blade and handle was inconclusive, that it could have come from Meredith or several other people. Additionally, it was proven that the knife in question, or I guess not proven, but experts testified that the knife in question could not have been the murder weapon, as it was not the right size to have made the wounds on Meredith's body. They also testified that there was a knife imprint, like a bloody knife imprint, on the bedding, and that the size did not match. A forensic expert testified that after reviewing the lab work, the blood in the bathroom was that of the victim only. Amanda's DNA was only present in the form of organic residue, which is consistent with her sharing that bathroom, of course, with Meredith, so her DNA there is not incriminating. They learned, or the defense learned rather, that the bloody shoe print and the shoe itself matched the imprint that was found in the bedroom. So Raphael could not have made that bloody shoe print. His shoes were a different size. So they contested that. Another point for the defense that they argued was that Raphael's DNA that was found on the bra clasp also contained the DNA of 3 other individuals that were unidentified at that time. It was confirmed not to have included Amanda's DNA. Now, it should be of note that the bra clasp, as I mentioned before, had been at the crime scene for 6 weeks before being found. I believe the date I initially said was in January, but I must have gotten that mixed up because based on the time frame, it looks like December 18th is a more accurate date, so I apologize for that. But this was 48 days after the murder that this was found. There's also video of the crime scene where initially you see the bra clasp in one area on the floor, and then later on in video footage you see that the bra clasp has moved on the floor. So obviously that's an indication that it had been kicked or tossed aside or something, and clearly that's an indication that it could have very well been contaminated before it was found, as there was many investigators going in and out of the crime scene, obviously between November 1st and when it was found on December 18th. With regards to the conflicting statements, the defense argued that these were made under duress, and they were deemed to have been obtained illegally. As I mentioned before, they were entitled to attorneys, which they were not provided at that time. They also both claim, as I mentioned, to have been physically hit and sleep deprived. So those were the major points of defense. Now, during the trial, Rudy was in the process of appealing his sentence, and on November 18th, he made incriminating statements about Amanda and changed his initial story. Now, keep in mind that he's appealing his initial sentence, and that obviously he has motive to lie about this, because he's trying to get a reduced sentence or get off on the charges. But again, he contradicts what he initially said, and he claims that Amanda was involved. He wrote a letter to his attorney and states that he and Meredith had been hanging out the night of the murder, that they had kissed and had consensual sex that evening. He says that later in the evening he was in the kitchen and he heard Amanda and Meredith arguing. He says that it was an argument over money and that there was some kind of accusation that Amanda had taken money from Meredith. He says he went to the washroom, and while he was in the washroom he heard an incredibly loud scream. He says he came out of the bathroom. He says that he saw an unidentified male fleeing the scene, and that Amanda and Meredith had gotten into some kind of scuffle, that he left because he was concerned or scared, he said, so he left the villa at this point in time, but claims that when he left, Amanda and Meredith had been fighting. So ultimately, because of this statement and implicating Amanda, his sentence got reduced from 30 years to 16 years. So I mean, when I look at that, I think it's pretty obvious that he was bribed by the Italian police to implicate Amanda, and in return, he was given a reduced sentence. about the night of the murder, but that what he wrote in his letter was true. So, on December 4th, Amanda and Retrial are convicted of murder. Amanda was sentenced to 26 years, and Retrial was sentenced to 25. They are also ordered to pay more than $7 million to Meredith's family, and Amanda is to pay Patrick $60,000 for defamation. Amanda and Retrial both appeal their sentences, and their appeal trials begin on June 27th, 2011. Rudy testifies in this trial as well and maintains that what he wrote in the letter is accurate. They have a former cellmate testify for the defense that Rudy told him in November 2009 that Amanda and Retrial were not involved. Multiple witnesses are also called to testify that they were offered monetary bribes to lie for the prosecution and provide a favorable testimony. I'm going to read that again because that's an important note. Several witnesses are called to testify for the defense that they were offered monetary bribes to lie for the prosecution and provide a favorable testimony. So we also have two experts who testified that the DNA evidence on the knife and bra clasp were unreliable and contaminated by poor handling. Results from the original findings could not be duplicated, and the DNA could have been from a multitude of people. This was part of the defense. They also lean into the claim that Rudy acted alone and that it's not possible for Amanda and Retrial to have been involved, as their DNA would have been everywhere at the crime scene. On October 3rd, 2011, Amanda and Retrial's convictions are overturned, and they are both released after 4 years in jail. The following day, on October 4th, Amanda returns to the U.S. She released a statement that day, in part saying, "The knowledge of my innocence has given me strength in the darkest times of this ordeal. Throughout this ordeal, I have received invaluable support from family, friends, and strangers. To them I say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your kindness has sustained me. I only wish that I could thank each and every one of you in person." I want to say too that by this point, the North American media had very much picked up on the story and thought that these two were wrongfully convicted. It was a big media story, and they had the support of North America versus Europe, who I think this showed their innocence more, but the Europeans and Italians were definitely less likely to believe that she's innocent and still have it stuck in their minds that she's guilty. On March 26, 2013, Italy's highest court reopens the case and orders a new trial because of what they say were deficiencies, contradictions, and illogical conclusions at the appeal court. They also argued that key evidence had been omitted in the appeal and that the conflicting statements made needed further questioning. On September 30th, 2013, the retrial starts, and Amanda is not present, but Retrial later would return to Italy to defend himself. He says of the retrial, "I would like to make you understand that these charges against me are absurd." He says there was not a basis to charge me, to put me in jail. wish anyone on earth to go through what I went through. Amanda also released a statement regarding the retrial. She says, I must repeat to you, I'm innocent. I did not rape. I did not steal. I did not kill Meredith. So, the retrial, I'm going to go through bullet points again, the prosecution and defense main points. So, for the prosecution, a previously unexamined DNA trace was found on the knife, and they had requested to test this. It was previously thought to have been too small to be tested, but the prosecution pushed forward, and ultimately they were granted the ability to retest this, and this was also supported by the defense. This DNA evidence turned out to be Amanda's, which strengthened the defense's case, because this supports the theory that Amanda cut herself at one point while cooking, and that's why her DNA was on the knife in multiple spots. Well, even though the first DNA they found was deemed inconclusive, so I guess I should say it explains why her DNA is on the knife at all. They allowed a request for a prisoner to testify, claiming that his brother had murdered Meredith, but these statements were later retracted. It should be noted that the court refused almost all of the defense's requests for things like new evidence or new witnesses, so there was very much a bias against the defense. The defense again argued that it would not be possible for Amanda and Retrial to have been a part of this murder and not have their DNA present at the crime scene. It should also be of note that one of the requests that was refused by the courts was to test some semen stains that they had found at the crime scene, but again this request was refused by the courts, and this was a request of the defense. The defense also argued how the DNA had been contaminated, how the DNA on the bra clasp was contaminated. So prosecutors argued that Meredith's wounds were consistent with Rudy not acting alone. They claimed that she was murdered standing up and had been stabbed from the front without any defense wounds, so they claim that this indicates she was restrained by somebody and then stabbed in the front by somebody else. For me, I don't see how that proves, like, just because they claim she was standing up when she was murdered. I mean, she could have been standing up when he cut her throat, and then he could have stabbed her further in the front. She's obviously going to be incapacitated after having her wound in the throat, so that would explain why she had no defense wounds. So I thought that argument by the prosecutor was a little bit weird, but that's what they argued. So on January 30th, 2014, Amanda and Retrial are reconvicted. The judge added 2 years to Amanda's sentence, so 28 years total, and Retrial was sentenced to his original sentence in order to surrender his passport. Now, Amanda got 2 additional years because of the defamatory statements she had made against her boss, Patrick. He had, from what I understand, he had sued her for slander or defamation. I forget the legal term, but that was also part of this. So she said in a statement, once they were reconvicted, keep in mind Amanda was not extradited back to Italy at this point in time. She was still in the US and planned to stay there unless there was an extradition order. So she says at the time, Basically, a wrongful conviction is horrific for the wrongfully accused, but it is also terribly bad for the victim, their surviving family, and society. Later on, the following year, on March 27th, 2015, the convictions are overturned by the Court of Cassation, Cassation, with the exception of the slander charge against Amanda, so they upheld that. She was sentenced to 3 years, but did not have to serve any more jail time, as, if you remember, she had been in jail for 4 years previously, so she had already more than served her time. She was also ordered to pay a fine to him. Now, when they overturned these convictions, they claimed that, or the court claimed that there were stunning flaws in the investigation, as well as a lack of evidence. Knox releases a statement just stating that she's tremendously relieved and grateful for the decision. So this would end the court case. There's no more appeals or retrials or anything like that. So this final overturning of their convictions would be the end of it as far as the murder trial goes. So finally they are cleared of that. In 2006, however, the Associated Press ruled that Amanda's rights had been violated during her interrogation. In her response, Amanda appealed her slander charges, or her slander conviction, based on the conditions of her initial implication and the conditions that she was put through before she gave that implicating confession. In January 2019, European Court of Human Rights ordered Italy to pay damages to Amanda of $21,000. Ultimately, however, the courts, after reviewing the decision, decided that Amanda had not sustained inhuman or degrading treatment, and she is reconvicted of the slander charge in June 2024, so just this year. As before, no jail time is ordered, and this ends any trial or appeal for the slander charges. So that is the end of this, basically the end of the court proceedings and the trial and all of that. I hope I did the story justice in explaining it. This is, as I mentioned, my first true crime video, so I'm sorry if it's a little bit scattered. My next one, I'm gonna have a little bit better organized now that I've done one. But I want to finish with a couple things. So, unfortunately, Meredith's parents both passed away in 2020 within 4 months of each other. John was 77 at the time of his death in June 2020. He was found on the side of the road, seemingly having been hit by a vehicle that took off. He was initially hospitalized with 2 fractured legs, a broken arm, and a head injury, but he passed away after being in the hospital for 3 weeks. 4 months after that, Arlene, 74 at the time, was hospitalized for COVID. This was during the early days of COVID, and she unfortunately passed away while at the hospital in Kershalton, Surrey in South London. They are both buried next to their daughter in Croydon, South London. Fast forward to 2021, Rudy is released from prison after serving only 13 years, which is pretty sad that you get convicted of murdering someone and raping them, and all you have to serve is 13 years. So currently, since all of this happened, Amanda, she currently lives in Seattle, Washington. She's married and has 2 children. In 2013, she wrote a best-selling memoir titled Waiting to Be Heard. She obviously, in that, details her experience behind bars and what life has been like, the trauma that she's dealt with afterwards, and all of those things. I can say that I've read that memoir, and it's definitely worth the read. It gives a lot of insight into the case. In 2014, she graduated from the University of Washington with a bachelor's degree in creative writing. Currently, she works as a freelance journalist and writer and does a lot of work advocating for those who have been wrongfully convicted. In October 2016, a Netflix documentary was released, and this documentary had the full support of Amanda. Apparently, they had been working with her for a couple of years, trying to convince her to support this project, and finally she did. In 2017, it was nominated for 2 Primetime Emmy Awards, including Outstanding Documentary or Non-Fictional Special. In 2018, she released an unscripted series on Facebook called The Scarlet Letter Reports, which gave high-profile women who had been publicly shamed a chance to tell their stories. Ultimately, the series was very publicly criticized and didn't last for very long. Later on, she would host a podcast that ran for 5 years called The Truth About Crime, and this was aimed to shed light on wrongful conviction cases and media sensationalization. Now I'm going to go to a quote from Amanda. "There is no way I can go back to being the person who I was before all this happened." She says this on Nightline in 2016. "I'm forever marked, and the important thing moving forward is just acknowledging that and acknowledging that I'm not the only one. I'm going to take ownership of the fact that I'm an exoneree, and I'm going to share the fact that there's a voice to be heard." Now, I want to end this with a quote, or a couple quotes from Meredith's family regarding Meredith. Her sister Stephanie says of Meredith, "Meredith will always be remembered for her own fight for life, and yet in her absence, her love and personality continue to shine." She adds, "Her strength and love remain strong after 17 years, and she will forever hold a lasting legacy in friendship and kindness that no media can change." A couple years prior, she released a statement as well, or the whole family, so the siblings released a statement on the 15-year anniversary of Meredith's death. They say, "Every anniversary of Meredith's death gives us pause for thought, but of course, as with anyone who has lost a loved one, especially in such tragic circumstances, it does not take an anniversary to remember them. It's something you carry with you every day. 15 years has passed in the blink of an eye, but yet we have lived